The air was cool and crisp as Kevin turned the key in his old Ford truck, a reliable companion for the past 20 years. The engine rumbled to life, a comforting sound he'd grown to depend on. Today, however, the drive felt different. It was his last commute to the Ford Motor Company, marking both the end of his 42-year career and his first day of retirement. As he backed out of the driveway, Kevin glanced at the empty passenger seat beside him, half expecting to see Emily there, her warm smile encouraging him on his new journey. But the seat was empty. Emily had been gone for 2 years, taken by cancer far too early. He flicked on the radio, and Sinatra's Summer Wind filled the cab. It was their song, the one they'd danced to in their living room, pretending they were swaying on a beach at sunset. Those days and nights, they went flying by, Sinatra crooned. Kevin's eyes misted at the lyrics, so poignant and fitting for today. 42 years, Em, Kevin murmured, speaking into the emptiness as if she could hear him. Can you believe it? Just doesn't seem real without you here. The drive to the factory was a path well tread, each landmark sparking memories of different times, days when he'd rushed to work, worried about layoffs during the recession, or the joy of driving home early after securing a promotion. Each stoplight was a marker of his life's routine, now coming to an end. As he approached a red light, he pulled to a stop beside a school bus, full of children laughing and pressing their faces against the windows. A small boy reminded him of his grandson, Charlie, with his cheeky grin and unruly brown hair. Remember how Charlie used to ask us to play pirates in the backyard, Em? Kevin said to the empty seat, a small smile playing on his lips. He's got your spirit, that's for sure. The light turned green, and Kevin continued on, passing the small coffee shop where he and Emily had spent countless Sunday mornings reading the newspaper together. He could almost see her across the table, glasses perched on her nose, sharing bits of news with him. Pulling into the factory parking lot, Kevin found his usual spot under an old oak tree. The leaves were just starting to turn, a riot of reds and golds above his head. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, gathering himself. I guess this is it, huh? He said aloud, taking his old factory ID off the mirror where it hung. He fingered the worn plastic, then sighed and pocketed it. Stepping out of the truck, he locked the door and turned to face the factory. The morning shift was changing, and he recognized some of the younger faces streaming past him into the building. A few nodded to him, one or two calling out a greeting. Morning, Mr. Kevin! Here it's your last day! Called a young technician named Tommy, whom Kevin had mentored the previous year. Sure is, Tommy. Make sure you keep those lines running smooth, hear? Kevin replied, managing a chuckle. You got it, boss. Hey, they're throwing you a big party, right? Heard there might be cake. Yeah, something like that, Kevin smiled. Don't you be eating it all before I get there. Wouldn't dream of it, sir. You take care now. As Tommy disappeared inside, Kevin felt a sudden pang of loss. This was his world, where he had spent more hours than he could count. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward the factory entrance, each step feeling heavier than the last. Inside, the familiar smells and sounds of the factory floor washed over him. The clang of metal, the whir of machinery. It was a cacophony that had scored his life for decades. He made his way to the locker room, nodding to familiar faces, each nod an acknowledgement of a shared history. At his locker, he spun the combination lock and opened the door. Inside, everything was as he'd left it. His work gloves, safety glasses, and an old picture of Emily taped to the inside door. He touched the photo gently. Wish me luck, Em, he whispered. Kevin took his time changing into his work clothes for the last time, folding his street clothes with a precision born of routine. As he buttoned up his factory shirt, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on what retirement might bring. Freedom felt daunting without Emily to share it. Stepping out into the corridor, Kevin headed towards the plant manager's office. He had paperwork to sign, formalities to observe. But first, there was a party in his honor, a celebration of his years at Ford. As he approached the break room, He could hear laughter and the murmur of voices. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door, stepping into the warmth of his colleagues' smiles. "Here's to new beginnings," Kevin said softly to himself as the room erupted into cheers. The late summer air was still warm as the sun began its descent, casting a golden glow over the small church where Kevin's friend Mike was getting married. Kevin had reluctantly agreed to attend, feeling somewhat out of place among the happy couples and festive decorations. He hadn't been to a wedding since Emily had passed, and the joyous occasion only reminded him of his loss. Inside the church, the atmosphere was charged with excitement. Families and friends chattered happily, their voices echoing off the stained glass windows. Kevin found a seat near the back, trying to stay inconspicuous, his mind wandering back to his own wedding day decades ago. As the ceremony began, Kevin's gaze was drawn to the procession of bridesmaids. Among them was a woman whose laughter seemed to light up the room. She had a grace about her that set her apart, her smile warm and genuine, reaching her sparkling eyes. Kevin found himself mesmerized, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. When the ceremony ended, Kevin made his way to the reception, held in the church's courtyard under strings of fairy lights. The woman he had noticed at the ceremony was there, mingling with guests, her laughter carrying over the crowd. Gathering his courage, Kevin approached her. She was standing by the buffet table, filling her plate. "Excuse me," Kevin started, feeling slightly nervous. "I couldn't help but notice your laugh during the ceremony. It's very infectious." The woman looked up, her smile broadening. "Thank you. I'm Sarah. And you are?" "Kevin," he replied, extending his hand. Sarah shook his hand warmly. "Nice to meet you, Kevin. So, what did you think of the ceremony?" "It was beautiful," Kevin said, sincerity in his voice. "The vows were quite touching." "They were, weren't they?" Sarah agreed. "It's moments like these that remind us of how powerful and beautiful love can be." Kevin nodded, feeling a connection to Sarah's sentiment. "I lost my wife 2 years ago," he said, not sure why he felt compelled to share something so personal. "Being here, it's both happy and a bit hard." Sarah's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that, Kevin. It must be tough." "It is," Kevin admitted, "but it's also nice to be around so much happiness. It gives me hope." "That's a wonderful way to look at it," Sarah replied. "If you don't mind me saying, I think your wife would be happy to see you out, enjoying life." Kevin smiled, touched by her kindness. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot." They moved to a quieter corner of the courtyard, where they continued their conversation away from the bustling crowd. Sarah shared stories of her travels and her work as a nurse, while Kevin talked about his years at Ford and his recent retirement. "Retirement is a big change," Sarah noted. "Do you have any plans for this new chapter in your life?" "I'm not entirely sure yet," Kevin confessed. "I've been thinking about traveling. Maybe finally take that trip to Ireland I've always talked about." "Ireland sounds amazing," Sarah said, her eyes lighting up. "The landscapes, the castles, the history, you should definitely go." "Maybe I will," Kevin said, feeling a surge of optimism. "And maybe I'll find some new hobbies. I've been considering photography." "Photography, that's a fantastic hobby. And Ireland would be the perfect place to start," Sarah encouraged. "You know, capturing those moments, it could be quite therapeutic." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, and as the evening wore on, Kevin felt a sense of renewal, a feeling he hadn't anticipated. When it was time to leave, Sarah handed him a small piece of paper. "Here's my number," she said with a smile. "If you ever want to talk or need travel tips for Ireland, give me a call." Kevin took the paper, feeling a flicker of excitement. "Thank you, Sarah. I just might take you up on that." As he walked back to his truck, Kevin felt lighter than he had in months. The evening had brought unexpected joy and the promise of new beginnings. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something good. The evening sun cast a warm glow over the backyard as Kevin watched his grandchildren run through the sprinkler. The laughter and shouts of the little ones filled the air, a stark contrast to the silence that had often pervaded his home since Emily's passing. Watching his family, Kevin felt a mix of melancholy and pride. He and Emily had built a life together filled with love, a legacy that lived on in their children and grandchildren. His daughter, Laura, came up beside him, handing him a lemonade. "They've got endless energy, don't they?" She smiled, watching her own children among the group. Kevin chuckled, accepting the drink. "They sure do. Reminds me of when you and your brother were young. Never a dull moment." Laura nodded, leaning against the porch railing. "I miss her, Dad. Mom would have loved to see them like this." Kevin's gaze softened as he looked at his daughter. "I know, Laura. She's here, though, in all of this. In every laugh, every game. They're all a part of her." Laura took a sip of her lemonade, then turned to him. "How are you really doing, Dad?" "I worry about you in that big house all alone." Kevin sighed, his eyes lingering on the children. "It's been hard, honey. The silence is the toughest part. But being here, with all of you, it helps." Laura reached out, squeezing his hand. "Why don't you consider moving closer to us? There's a lovely community not far from here. You could have a smaller place, easier to manage, and be near the grandkids." Kevin considered it, the idea appealing more than he wanted to admit. "Maybe I will. It might be good to start fresh, be closer to family." Family moments and discussions. As the barbecue continued, Kevin found himself immersed in family stories, catching up on everyone's lives. His son, Michael, sat down next to him as the sun began to set, the sky painted with streaks of orange and purple. "Dad, have you thought more about that trip to Ireland you mentioned last Christmas?" Michael asked, flipping burgers on the grill. Kevin smiled, the trip having been a dream for so long. "I have. Thinking I might go next spring. It'd be nice to see where your grandpa was born." "That sounds amazing," Michael said. "You should really go for it. And hey, if you need a travel buddy, just let me know." Kevin laughed, the sound mingling with the crackling of the fire pit. "I just might take you up on that, Mike. It would be good to have some company." Planning for the future later, as the family gathered around the fire pit, Kevin watched the flames flicker and dance, casting warm light over the faces of his family. The conversation turned to future plans and dreams, a topic that Emily had always steered during such family gatherings. His youngest granddaughter, Sophie, cuddled up next to him with a marshmallow stick. "Grandpa, when you go to Ireland, will you bring me back a fairy?" Kevin chuckled, ruffling her hair. "I'll bring you back the prettiest fairy I can find." Sophie beamed, satisfied with his promise. Turning to his son-in-law, Kevin spoke more seriously. "I've been giving some thought to what Laura suggested earlier about moving." His son-in-law nodded. "It's a good idea, Kevin. There's a great community near us. Lots of activities, a good place to meet people. It could be a new adventure for you." Kevin watched the fire, considering the changes that lay ahead. "I think I'm ready for that adventure. It's time to make new memories, while keeping the old ones close to my heart." The family continued to talk into the night, making plans and sharing dreams. Kevin felt a sense of contentment settle over him, surrounded by the family he and Emily had built together. It was a life full of love, and despite the pain of loss, he was grateful for every moment, ready to embrace whatever came next with the same love and strength that had guided him all these years. The setting was their 15-year wedding anniversary. Kevin had planned a surprise trip to the coastal town where he and Emily had honeymooned, hoping to recapture some of the magic that had defined their early years together. But as the trip neared, Emily seemed distant, distracted by phone calls she'd quickly dismiss when Kevin entered the room. One evening, a week before their scheduled departure, Kevin arrived home early from work to find Emily not alone in their living room. She was deep in conversation with a man Kevin recognized as an old friend from college, someone who'd recently reconnected with Emily on social media. As Kevin entered, the atmosphere shifted palpably, the air charged with a tension he couldn't immediately place. Emily jumped up, her smile forced. "Kevin, you're home early," she said, quickly moving toward him, her eyes avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, the project wrapped up sooner than expected," Kevin replied, his eyes flicking between Emily and the man, who stood awkwardly, adjusting his watch. "I don't think we've seen Tom in a while, have we?" Emily nodded, a little too eagerly. "Yes, Tom was just leaving. We were just catching up." Tom, picking up on the cue, extended a hand to Kevin. "Good to see you, Kevin. It's been too long." Kevin shook his hand, feeling the unspoken undercurrents. "Indeed it has. Safe drive home, Tom." As the door closed behind Tom, the silence that fell was heavy. Kevin looked at Emily, wanting to ask so many questions but unsure where to start. "Emily, what was that about?" His voice was calm but carried a weight of concern. "It's nothing, really. Tom just needed some advice on a personal matter." "You know I've always been good at listening," Emily said, her voice a little too casual. Kevin, not convinced, decided to let it go for the moment. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The revelation days later, the doubts that had begun to gnaw at Kevin refused to subside. He decided to confront Emily again, this time more directly. They were in the kitchen, Emily preparing dinner, when Kevin broached the subject. "Emily, can we talk about Tom's visit the other day?" Kevin leaned against the counter, watching her closely. Emily stiffened slightly, a sign Kevin had come to recognize when something was amiss. "Kevin, we've been over this. It was nothing important." "But it doesn't feel like nothing to me," Kevin pressed, his voice tight with emotion. "It feels like there's more you're not telling me." Emily set down the knife she had been using to chop vegetables, her back still turned to him. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I want the truth, Em," Kevin said, his heart pounding as he took a step closer to her. Turning to face him, Emily's eyes were filled with a turmoil that matched his own. "Tom and we've been talking a lot recently. And yes, maybe it's been more personal than I admitted." Kevin's heart sank. Are you having an affair with him?" "No." The word came out sharp and fast. "No, Kevin, it's not like that. But," Emily paused, taking a breath, "I have been feeling a bit lost lately, confused about us. Tom has been someone I could talk to." Kevin felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. The possibility of losing Emily, the foundation of all he cherished, was too much to bear. "So, what does this mean for us?" His voice was barely a whisper. Emily wiped her eyes, struggling with her own emotions. "I don't know, Kevin. I love you, but I'm not sure that's enough right now." The aftermath. The trip was canceled. Instead of revisiting the site of their honeymoon, they found themselves navigating the more treacherous terrain of marital strife. The days were filled with long silences punctuated by short, clipped conversations about mundane things. Each was a dance around the larger issues that lay between them like a chasm. One evening, as they sat on opposite ends of the couch, an impasse hanging in the air, Kevin reached for Emily's hand. It was a small gesture, but one laden with all the hope he could muster. "Emily, whatever this is, we can figure it out. We've been through so much. Don't let this be the thing that breaks us." Emily looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "I want to believe that, Kevin. I do. But I need time to understand what I'm feeling. Can you give me that?" Kevin, heartbreaking but not wanting to push her further away, nodded. "Take all the time you need, Em. I'm here." The path ahead was uncertain, the outcome unclear. But Kevin knew one thing for sure: he would fight for Emily, for their marriage with everything he had. Even if it meant waiting in painful limbo while she sorted through her feelings, he would wait. For her, for them, for the family they had built and cherished. The days following Kevin's confrontation with Emily were fraught with a tense calm. Kevin found himself oscillating between anger and sorrow, the foundations of their marriage seemingly quaking under the weight of uncertainty. His heart felt heavy, an unrelenting cloud hanging over what used to be their happy home. He kept replaying their conversations, searching for something he might have missed, a clue to when things started to fall apart. One evening, after a particularly strained dinner where words passed sparingly between them like cautious shadows, Kevin decided to clear his head with a walk. The cool night air was a minor relief to his simmering thoughts. As he walked through their neighborhood, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an old friend, Mark, who had moved to the city a few years back. They hadn't spoken in months, but tonight Mark was in town and wanted to catch up over a drink. Kevin hesitated, then thought a night away from home might help. At the bar. The bar was dimly lit, the murmur of low conversations filling the air. Mark waved from a booth in the corner, a wide grin on his face. "Kevin, my man, it's been too long," Mark greeted him, clapping him on the back as he slid into the booth. "Yeah, it has," Kevin replied, managing a smile. "Thanks for reaching out." They ordered drinks, and Mark launched into stories of his new life in the city, his job, the people he'd met. But as the night wore on, the conversation shifted. "So, how's Emily?" "How are things back home?" Mark asked, his tone casual but perceptive. Kevin's smile faltered, and he looked down at his drink. "Not great, actually. We've hit a rough patch." Mark's expression grew serious. "I'm sorry to hear that, man. Want to talk about it?" Kevin hesitated, then the words started spilling out. He told Mark everything, about Tom, the emotional affair, and the uncertainty that now clouded their marriage. "That's tough, Kevin. Really tough," Mark said, shaking his head. "But you know what they say about getting even." Kevin frowned. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes a taste of their own medicine is what people need to appreciate what they have," Mark suggested, a mischievous glint in his eye. Kevin considered this, the idea burrowing into his hurt pride. "I don't know, Mark. That doesn't sound like me." "Maybe not, but maybe it's exactly what you need," Mark pushed, ordering another round of drinks. As the night progressed, Kevin's thoughts blurred with the alcohol, and Mark's suggestion started to seem like a viable, if reckless, way to balance the scales. The decision. A few days later, Kevin found himself back at the same bar, this time alone. He sat brooding over a drink when a woman took the seat beside him. She was attractive and immediately struck up a conversation. "Tough day?" she asked, noticing his somber expression. "You could say that," Kevin replied, his voice tinged with a mix of sadness and cynicism. They talked, the woman easygoing and seemingly empathetic to his troubles. As the night wore on, one drink turned into several, and the woman suggested they go somewhere more private. In a decision fueled by hurt and alcohol, Kevin agreed. The morning after. The next morning, Kevin woke up with a pounding headache and a heavy heart. He was alone. The woman had left some time before dawn. The reality of his actions hit him like a cold shower. He felt a deep shame wash over him. This wasn't him. This wasn't how he solved problems. When he returned home, Emily was in the kitchen, her back to him. For a moment, he considered confessing everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he said softly, "Em, we need to talk. About us." Emily turned, her eyes weary but hopeful. "I know. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Kevin. I want to fix this. I want to try." Kevin's heart sank further. "I do too, Em. More than anything." But his words felt hollow, the guilt of his retaliation weighing on him. As they sat down to talk, Kevin realized that the path to healing would be longer and more complex than he had anticipated. His own betrayal, though driven by pain and anger, had only added another layer of hurt to their already fragile relationship. Now, more than ever, they had to find a way back to each other, to rebuild what had been so carelessly fractured. The silence of the house was deafening. The emptiness of the room seemed to echo with the remnants of a life that had once been filled with love and laughter. Now, those sounds were distant memories for Kevin as he navigated his new reality, a life without Emily. After months of trying to mend what had been broken, Emily had decided it was best for them both if she moved out. The decision had been mutual, on the surface, but Kevin felt like he was suffocating under the weight of his regrets and the absence of her presence. Packing up. One afternoon, Kevin found himself standing in the doorway of Emily's art studio, a room he hadn't entered since she left. Canvases and brushes were still scattered about, as if she might walk in and start painting at any moment. He needed to clear out her things, but every item he touched reminded him of her. His friend Dave came over to help, walking into the studio with a box in hand. "Hey, Kevin, thought I'd come by and help pack up some of this stuff," Dave said, placing the box on the table. Kevin managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Dave. I don't even know where to start." Dave picked up a framed photo from the desk, a picture of Kevin and Emily at the beach, smiling and carefree. "She loved this place," he remarked, handing the photo to Kevin. Kevin took the photo, his fingers tracing the edges of the frame. "Yeah, she did. We both did." They worked in silence for a while, wrapping paintings and sorting through supplies. The task was therapeutic in some ways, but each wrapped item felt like another piece of his heart being stored away. A moment of reflection. Later, sitting amidst boxes filled with Emily's belongings, Kevin found an old sketchbook. He flipped through it, landing on a page with a drawing of their first house together. The details were vivid, almost jumping off the page. "This was her favorite project," Kevin said softly, showing the sketchbook to Dave. "You guys built a beautiful life together, Kevin. It's hard to see it change," Dave replied, his voice tinged with sadness. Kevin nodded, closing the sketchbook. "I just wish I could go back, fix things." "Life doesn't have a rewind button, buddy, but it does have a play button. You gotta keep going, for her, for you." Kevin sighed, knowing Dave was right, but unsure how to move forward. A new beginning? Weeks passed, and the house felt more like a museum of their past than a home. Kevin knew he needed a change. One evening, his daughter Megan called. They hadn't spoken much since the separation, and he was surprised to hear her voice. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Megan's voice was cautious but caring. "I'm managing, Meg. How are the kids?" "They miss Grandma. We all do," Megan replied. "Dad, have you thought about what you're going to do now?" Kevin hesitated. "I've been thinking of selling the house. It's too full of memories, too big for just me." Megan was silent for a moment. "That might be good for you, Dad. A fresh start, maybe closer to us?" "Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Maybe find a smaller place, something easier to manage." "We'd love to have you closer, Dad. The kids would too. And I think Mom would want that for you." Kevin felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks, Meg. I think I'd like that." Resolution. By the end of the chapter, Kevin decided to put the house on the market. As he signed the papers with the realtor, he felt a bittersweet sense of closure. He was letting go of the life he had built with Emily, but he was also stepping toward something new, something unknown. The realization that life continues, even in the face of profound loss, began to take root. Kevin wasn't sure what the future held, but he was learning to embrace it, one uncertain step at a time, with the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find happiness again. Months after moving into a smaller, more manageable home closer to his daughter Megan, Kevin began to find a new rhythm in life. His new neighborhood was quiet, populated with a mix of young families and older residents. As he settled into this new chapter, Kevin frequently visited the local community center, which hosted weekly card games and social gatherings, providing him with opportunities to meet new people and gradually build a network of friends. One afternoon, while attending a local photography class at the community center, a hobby he had picked up to fill his days and keep Emily's artistic spirit alive in his heart, he met Nora. Nora was a vivacious widow who had taken up photography to document her travels. Her energy was infectious, and her perspective on life after loss resonated deeply with Kevin. Meeting Nora. Kevin was adjusting his camera when Nora approached him, noticing his struggle with the settings. "Having trouble there?" Nora asked with a gentle smile, peering over her glasses. Kevin looked up, slightly embarrassed. "Yeah, I'm still getting the hang of all these buttons." "Let me show you a quick trick," Nora offered, stepping closer. She adjusted the dial on Kevin's camera, her hands sure and steady. "There, try that setting. It's perfect for the lighting in here." "Thanks," Kevin said, impressed. "I'm Kevin, by the way." "Nora," she replied, shaking his hand. "I love seeing new faces in this class. Photography's a great way to see the world, even if it's just our little corner of it." They laughed, and as the class continued, they chatted about their favorite subjects to photograph. Nora's enthusiasm for life and her ability to find beauty in the ordinary helped Kevin see his surroundings in a new light. Coffee. After class. After the class ended, Nora packed up her camera and turned to Kevin. "I usually grab a coffee at the cafe down the street after class. Would you care to join me?" Kevin hesitated, unused to impromptu invitations since Emily's departure, but something about Nora's easy demeanor made him accept. "That sounds great," he said. As they walked to the cafe, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Over coffee, Nora shared stories of her travels with her late husband and how those experiences had shaped her view on life and loss. "You know, after my husband passed away, I realized life is just too short to stop exploring," Nora said, stirring her coffee. "I decided to travel anywhere I could, take photos, and meet new people. It helps keep the memories alive but also makes new ones." Kevin nodded, deeply relating to the sentiment. "I've been thinking of traveling more myself. There's a lot of the world I haven't seen yet." "You should," Nora encouraged. "Maybe start with somewhere you and Emily dreamed of visiting. It's a wonderful tribute to her and a way to heal." Kevin considered this, touched by Nora's understanding and sensitivity. "Maybe I will. Ireland has always been on my list." "Ireland sounds magical," Nora smiled. "You'll have to show me the photos when you go." A new friendship. In the weeks that followed, Kevin and Nora became regular companions, often meeting after photography class to share coffee and stories. Nora introduced Kevin to her circle of friends, who welcomed him with warmth and inclusion. One evening, as they were leaving the community center, Nora stopped and turned to Kevin. "You know, I'm really glad you decided to join that photography class." Kevin smiled, feeling a sense of companionship he hadn't felt in a long time. "Me too, Nora. It's been a lot more than just learning about cameras." They stood there for a moment, the setting sun casting a warm glow around them. Nora then said, "Life has a way of giving us second chances, Kevin. I'm glad we both took ours." As Kevin drove home that evening, he felt a lightness in his chest, a feeling of hope and anticipation for the future, intertwined with the peace of having cherished the past. Nora had unexpectedly become a part of his journey, a sign that even after loss, life could offer new beginnings and unexpected friendships. As the months passed, Kevin's friendship with Nora deepened. They continued their weekly meetings after photography class, and it wasn't long before those meetings extended into weekend excursions to local art exhibits, nature walks, and even a few short road trips to nearby towns. Kevin hadn't realized how much he'd isolated himself in his grief until Nora came along, bringing with her a burst of energy and enthusiasm for life that was contagious. One crisp autumn afternoon, they found themselves at a small vineyard for a wine tasting event. The vineyard was a picturesque scene of rolling hills and rows of golden vines basking in the gentle sun. As they walked along a path between the vines, Nora stopped to take a photo of a particularly beautiful cluster of grapes. Kevin watched her work, admiring her eye for detail. He realized that what had begun as a shared interest in photography had blossomed into something much deeper. He cherished Nora's company, and somewhere along the line, his feelings had evolved. He felt a warmth towards her that he hadn't expected to feel again. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Nora said, gesturing to the scenery. "It is," Kevin agreed, "but not as beautiful as you." Nora blushed, looking surprised but pleased. "Kevin, that's sweet of you to say." Kevin took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "Nora, these past few months with you have been some of the happiest I've had in a long time. I've come to care for you a great deal." Nora smiled, her eyes meeting his. "I feel the same way, Kevin. You've brought so much joy into my life." They continued walking, their hands brushing occasionally, until Kevin reached out to hold hers. Nora didn't hesitate to squeeze his hand back, their steps sinking as they walked. A conversation about the future. Later, they sat on a bench overlooking the vineyard, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses before them. Kevin poured the wine, his hand steady despite the emotional tumult he felt inside. "Nora, I've been thinking about us, about the future," Kevin began, his voice soft but clear. Nora turned to him, her expression open and attentive. "So have I." "I don't know what the next chapter holds," Kevin continued, "but I'd like to find out with you. Would you consider that? Us? Together?" Nora's face lit up with a smile that warmed Kevin's heart. "Yes, Kevin. I'd like that very much." They clinked glasses, sipping the wine, which seemed to taste sweeter now that a new possibility lay before them. Love and renewal. As the season changed, so did Kevin's life. He and Nora began to weave their lives more closely together. Nora introduced Kevin more fully to her world, her friends, and her interests, which she embraced with open arms. Kevin felt a renewal of spirit, a rejuvenation of his heart, which he had feared might never come. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in Kevin's home, Nora broached a subject they had danced around. "Kevin, have you thought about what it means for us moving forward? I mean, in terms of living arrangements, the future?" Kevin took her hand, feeling the warmth of the fire reflect his own feelings. "I've thought a lot about it. And while I love this house, I love the idea of building something new with you even more." Nora nodded, her eyes gleaming with a mix of joy and tears. "I want that too. A place where we can both start fresh together. So, let's do it. Let's start looking for a place that can be ours. A place where we can both be happy, surrounded by the new memories we'll create together." Nora leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "That sounds perfect." The night deepened around them, the crackle of the fire playing a soft melody. They didn't need words now. The comfort of their shared silence spoke volumes. Love had found them in their autumn years, proving that renewal was always possible, that the heart could always open again, no matter the past hurts or losses. Kevin looked at Nora, her face illuminated by the firelight, and he felt a profound gratitude. Life had given him a second chance at love, and this time, he was ready to embrace it fully, without reservation. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If today's story resonated with you, or if you've experienced similar challenges in your relationships, remember you're not alone. We hope this video offers some insight or comfort as you navigate your own path forward. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We value your perspectives and would love to hear your stories too. Join us next time for another profound exploration of the heart's resilience. Until then, take care and keep seeking your truth.